What's up, friends? Mike here from Mercado Airwaves. If you missed any one of our past interviews with amazing guests like future Hall of Famer and pound for pound best fighter in the world, UFC flyweight champion Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson,
another day at the office, I get to go out there and test my skill.
To award-winning producer, director, and actor Orlando Jones. Orlando, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, sir. I'm good, brother. How you doing?
And all the other interesting guests we've had on. Joining us today is director and writer David Ferrier.
Thanks so much, brother. I appreciate you having me on the show.
MMA legend Chael Sonnen joins us today.
Keep listening to your show. This is great. Thanks, my friend.
Just subscribe to us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. And while you're there, please like, review, and rate us, friends. It helps so much. We also have a Patreon for anyone who would like to support the show. Just visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves and see how you can get all of our interviews ad-free and before anyone else, and how you can get your business or company spotlighted on the show. Follow us on Twitter at mmercado2333. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/Mike Mercado2333. And if you would like to see what we're up to behind the scenes, follow us on Instagram, Mike Mercado2333. Thanks for listening and all the support.
Enjoy our shows? Follow the Mercado Airwaves crew all over social media. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. On Instagram, Nicole is at Typing When Tipsy. Alex is at Mercado2121. Mike is at Mike Mercado2333. And our true crime show is at Murder Mysteries and More. And on Twitter, Nicole is at Typing When Tipsy. Alex is at Mercado21Alex. And Mike is at mmercado2333. You can follow the network at Mercado Airwaves. Follow our pop culture show on Twitter at Good Brothers Pod. Get us on the go by downloading our programs anywhere you get your favorite podcast, like iTunes, SoundCloud, Podbean, Stitcher, and other popular sites. Just search us at Mercado Airwaves. While you're at it, please like, rate, review, and share us with your friends. Visit us on youtube.com/Mike Mercado2333. Click the subscribe and like button to get notified every time a new episode or interview is posted. Support Mercado Airwaves by visiting patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves, the home of our interviews with athletes and celebrities, which you can get ad-free and early before it's released to the public. Come play video games with us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. Mercado Airwaves is powered by Munch Art Design. Like them on Facebook at Munch Art Design. Voiceover work on Mercado Airwaves is performed by Josh Fox.
Thank you for coming with us here on Sports from the Couch, and it is our honor and pleasure as we start to get ready for the Fall Classic itself. We welcome in our friend of the show. You could catch him all over the universe doing some awesome work at Baseball Weekend on Twitter. You could go to soundcloud.com, Shiv Sports. Send them an email with all your hot takes at baseballwj@gmail.com, or you could bother the man himself directly on Twitter at Paul Chivari. Ladies and gentlemen, our friend Paulie, welcome back to the show, my man. It is time for some World Series talk.
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited to be back. I'm excited for this World Series.
Yeah, it's a great matchup. It's something that you and I kind of talked about, joked about, and we actually got to this point. And before we get to all that, I want to make sure that we get a little love to your family. You guys grew a little bit over the stretch of the end of the season, and it's kind of cool that the baby is, he's hanging around now, and we're in the World Series. He's not a little gloob of a human now. He's actually a little man.
Yeah, he's growing so quickly, and it's so funny that we were talking about this on our preview show for the season. I was like, I think it dawned on me in the moment when we were talking that I'm going to be holding my son during the World Series this year, and yeah, tomorrow I'll get to do that.
Yeah, it's great, and it's a hell of a World Series for little dudes' first year on this planet. And of course, we're talking about the Houston Astros from the ALs and the Washington Nationals from the NL, the ALCS champion, the NLCS champion, in a wonderful matchup that we'll be breaking down throughout the entire show. But I want to see how we got here. And it all started with the wild card round between Tampa Bay, Oakland, Milwaukee, and Washington. And what came from that is an amazing story in the NL, where Washington then went up against a juggernaut in the Los Angeles Dodgers and won in 5 games. Then the upstart hot team that just destroyed through September in the St. Louis Cardinals, beating what a lot of people thought was the dark horse in the NL in the Atlanta Braves in 5 games. And then Washington just steamrolled through what a lot of people thought was a cruising for the St. Louis Cardinals in an impressive fashion to go on to the World Series. And in the other league, you talk about 2 juggernauts that, in Houston's case, kind of struggled and was tested by the Tampa Bay Rays. And New York, who went through the New York Yankees, had a tough matchup against Houston and just could never figure them out, including a Jose Altuve home run to get them into the Fall Classic. And here we are now, Houston versus Washington. Before we get into what everybody's talking about, Paulie, when it comes to the marquee matchup of this matchup, what are your initial thoughts of what this series represents for the MLB?
It's just starting pitching. I think I saw a stat that was collectively these guys, the top three pitchers for each team are about $170 million for this year alone for all six of those pitchers. Starting pitching is crucial. And I think when you have Cy Young Award winners like Justin Verlander and Zach Greinke and, a guy that could be a Cy Young Award winner in Garrett Cole or, guys like Steven Strasburg and a multi-Cy Young Award winner like Max Scherzer. Good things can happen when you got great pitching and it carries you very far.
And speaking of those matchups, these are just some of the numbers that I got from the awesome people of CBS Sports. Steven Strasburg, 18-6, 3.32 ERA, a 1.04 WHIP, 251 K, 52 base on balls on 209 innings pitched with a 6.3 WAR. How about 11-7 with 2.92 ERA for Max Scherzer? How about Patrick Corbin going 14-7 with a 3.25 ERA and a 1.18 WHIP? How about Anibal Sanchez with 11-8 and a 3.85 ERA? And all the Astros, like you mentioned, Garrett Cole 20-5, a 2.5 ERA, maybe bringing that to the south side, but that's for a different show. How about Justin Verlander 21-6? 2.58 ERA and 18-5 Zach Greinke with a 2.93 ERA. I know over the last few years we've talked about offense. We've seen it with certain teams in the World Series, but Houston and Washington have really brought this reality down that no matter how great launch angle is, no matter how much the sabermetricians may want to say, a fastball and a nasty curveball could shut down any mathematician's lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. But those regular season numbers don't mean anything at this point. I mean, we've seen some of these guys struggle. Justin Verlander, to name one, the last time he went out and played against the Yankees. So, I mean, it's not a slam dunk for these teams that these pitchers are going to perform well in the World Series.
So now that we know what we're looking at when it comes to the pitching matchups, how we got to the scenario, let's go ahead and really do this, Paulie, because it's a wonderful matchup. I don't necessarily think we all picked it, but we all thought it might be a possibility. I want to break down this first thing, though, this first notion. One of the stories into this World Series will be for Washington getting there without Bryce Harper. Obviously,
yeah, that's the big.
Right,
that's the biggest storyline.
So let me ask you this. With that in mind, Bryce Harper signing this huge deal in the division, that team not getting to the playoffs, Washington making this quote-unquote Cinderella run from the wild card game to the World Series. Obviously, with talent, your team is not as talented without Bryce Harper. But they have had some guys step up on this team, Paulie. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Soto and some of these boys that have taken to a next level that gets them from a one-game elimination in the NL wildcard game to possibly 4 wins away from a World Series, their first World Series in franchise history?
Well, for starters, Bryce Harper, he's a superstar, but he wasn't the best player last year. So I don't think there was a major drop-off by losing him. And of course, you have Anthony Rendon having an MVP season. I mean, it's going to be debatable whether Rendon or Christian Yelich or Cody Bellinger ends up with the MVP for the National League, but Rendon is definitely in the conversation. And I think he's proving it this postseason with the way he's been playing. Arguably, he could have been the MVP of the NLCS if it wasn't Howie Kendrick. But you mentioned Juan Soto, who was, I believe, 19, 20 years old last year, 20 years old last year. Mm-hmm. He's still a baby. I mean, and he improved from year one to year two, and he didn't have a bad year one at all. So, I mean, I think the Nationals, if you really look at the numbers pitching-wise, they're about the same as they were last year, but now they added Patrick Corbin. So they're a little bit deeper in their starting rotation, because they've lost from years past. They had Gio Gonzalez or Tanner Rourke. So they're a little bit stronger top-heavy-wise, pitching-wise, and their talent top-heavy-wise in the field, in that batting order is very strong. And I think they've proven that you don't need to pay a guy $30 million a year like Bryce Harper in order to go out and compete for championships.
Now, do you think Houston relied a little bit too much on the home run ball when it came into the American League Championship Series? I mean, you're going to get into a slugfest with the Yankees. There's no doubt about that. That's how you have to win that series. But do you think with that type of mindset that I think they hit like 8 home runs in the ALCS, we've seen it work for some teams in the World Series, and we've seen it backfire when a good pitching staff could just shut you down and keep the ball in the ballpark. And we have seen that the baseball, for the most part throughout these playoffs, have been staying in the ballpark. Do you think that that might be one of the key Achilles heels for this Houston team for this matchup with this pitching rotation in Washington?
It might be. I mean, despite the fact that they relied heavily on the home run, they're still only slugging .358, which is not good for this playoffs. I mean, that puts them right around the Nationals. Nationals are .382, but the Dodgers, for instance, in their 5 games slugged .428. The Yankees slugged .430. So I mean, and yeah, Milwaukee has the best slugging percentage, but they only played 1 game, so it's really, like the 2 home runs that they hit in that game, or 1, I don't even remember, in the NL wild card. But I mean, let's bring that up. How crazy is it that potentially Christian Yelich fouling that ball off of his right kneecap back in early September is probably the reason why the Nationals have gotten this far. Now, the reason why I say that is because if you think of that one play in the National League wild card game, that misplay by the right fielder, Trent Grisham, led to the Nationals taking the lead in that game in the bottom of the 8th inning, and then they closed out that game in the top of the 9th, getting the 3 outs that they needed to advance to the next round. Now, I don't want to take anything away from the Los Angeles Dodgers or the St. Louis Cardinals. Those teams could have knocked out Washington as well. But if you really think about it, if Yelich is healthy, Grisham isn't in right field, Yelich is in right field, and Grisham doesn't make that rookie mistake he did overplaying the ball, and Yelich makes that play, and perhaps that game stays tied after 8 innings. And who knows, even in that scenario, you'd have Yelich batting in that game. The Brewers might have won that National League wild card game.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting about the wild card in the National League specifically is it had that feeling that Milwaukee was going to have this magical run. Even if I think specifically if they had Christian Yelich, they probably would be in the World Series right now. They would be the Washington of this series. I don't know if they would have won the division, though. I think they did have enough. I think they had this type of momentum that just kind of sputtered at the end. But that injury to Christian Yelich did not destroy this team like I thought it was going to. You and I did a show, I think, in September or maybe a little bit before the All-Star break, and I mentioned to you, I thought it was going to come down to a 3-team race like it did in the NL, and I thought it was going to be Milwaukee that's, sputtered at the end and the wheels will fall off. And, look at who Joe Maddon's now a Los Angeles Angels manager, so it's like we saw how that ended up. And I think it's really interesting that either one of these teams, it felt like, was a team of destiny. And I know there's no X factors. There's no, you can't put this into a computer and break this down, but there is something to, I felt something special out of this NL wildcard team, wildcard series. Like these teams felt kind of special. I don't necessarily think the Dodgers or the Braves felt very special. I think they're talented teams, but it's almost more of the same with those 2 organizations. The real X factors in the National League were the 2 NL Central teams, in the Cardinals and Milwaukee. And lo and behold, it's the Washington Nationals that nobody was paying attention to that made this crazy run. And like you said, it all could have started from a Christian Yelich incident.
Yeah, I don't, and I was writing off the Milwaukee Brewers before that injury when we did that podcast, and my biggest qualm was the pitching. I just didn't think was there overall for Milwaukee. Now, they benefited from the September call-ups and the fact that Craig Counsell, the Brewers manager, could use enough guys in certain roles to really kind of bullpen their way through the end of the season, and they went on a tremendous run. I mean, I had posted on my Facebook page towards the end of the month that, they're on a tremendous run that I just did not see coming. I didn't really think that Milwaukee was going to get that far when we last talked. And I think if they would have gotten into the playoffs and would have been limited to a 25-man roster, I think eventually they would have gotten exposed in a series. Now, game to game, yeah, you can put your best guy up there like a Brandon Woodruff and, get your way through the game. But, you saw that Josh Hader arguably was one of their best guys out of the bullpen, and he was the one that gave up the had that bad 8th inning against the Nationals. So I just don't think that Milwaukee would have been strong enough with a healthy Christian Yelich to get too far into the playoffs. perhaps they get past the Washington Nationals, because the Nationals did not look good in that game.
Right.
But, maybe that means Brewers would have played the Dodgers. Dodgers would have gotten to that round, and then it would have been Dodgers-Cardinals. We could be sitting here talking about a rematch of the 2017 World Series with Dodgers and Astros had Christian Yelich not fouled that ball off of his kneecap. But who knows? I mean, we're here now. The important thing is we're here now, and I don't think – I mean, you know me. I wrote off the Washington Nationals a while ago, and it wasn't just because of Bryce Harper. I know that was the argument I was making back in March was how could you get better and lose Bryce Harper? I didn't think that they did enough to be a better team. And I really thought that Philadelphia was going to be a better team, not just because of Bryce Harper, but, it was unforeseen. The way Bryce Harper kind of works is every other year is his bad year. So I thought that a change of scenery and a new contract might reinvigorate some of those numbers that we're used to with him. And he had some moments. He had some good moments this year, but overall he was really just lackluster. But, the fact that the Phillies brought in Gene Segura, and I think it was a little unforeseen that David Robertson got injured in their bullpen and Odubel Herrera getting the domestic violence charge.
Right.
I think there was – and I think managerial, there was something wrong with Gabe Kapler where, he just wasn't able to manage that type of talent. And the Phillies went and remedied that situation by firing him after his second season. So the Phillies were broken. That was my team that I thought that was going to get to the World Series, and that was the National League East division winner in my preview. And I had an all NL East championship series, but I had the Mets. I had Phillies Mets going instead of Braves Nationals. And I think my reasoning going into that was I thought the Braves were still a little too young. I thought that they were a little bit ahead of schedule on their rebuild last year, and I didn't know that they would be able to follow that up this year. And they were. The Braves were a great team all year, and they just disappeared against the Cardinals. And really, I think if you take away that first inning against the Cardinals in Game 5 of the division series, where the Cardinals put up 10 runs before the Braves even picked up the bats, I think if you get rid of that inning, maybe the Braves advance to the next round and play the Nationals, and maybe the Braves who played the Nationals this year, 19 games, very familiar with each other, maybe the Braves are in the series right now. And that was my original playoff prediction, my mindset going into it. I saw the Nationals beating the Dodgers. I saw that happening. I just didn't think that the strength that we always saw with the Dodgers of their pitching, Walker Buehler, Clayton Kershaw, I didn't think that was going to be enough to carry them over into the next round. And I thought that Washington having Max Scherzer and Steven Strasburg, as well as Patrick Corbin, was going to be enough to get them past the Dodgers. I just didn't think, though, that the Nationals would be able to get past the Braves. And I mean, I never really give a before the series change, after the Cardinals advance. I never put in a thing where Cardinals versus Nationals was going to happen. But with my wife being a Cardinals fan, I think I was telling her beforehand, I was like, it doesn't look good. If they can't get Game 1 against Anibal Sanchez, you have to then face Max Scherzer and Steven Strasburg. Right. Realistically, the Cardinals could be down by 3 games going into Game 4. And that's exactly what happened.
Right.
And I really didn't see the Sanchez no-hitter through 7 2/3 happening. That was a bit of a surprise to me.
And it's what happens in hockey, though, when your goalie stands on his head and gets you through a Stanley Cup playoff. It's the same thing that happened to this Washington team is they've just shut down really good bats. And they've done it against teams that we did not expect that to happen. But we do know that there's a lot of talent. Now that we've seen it play out, and now that we have the 2020 vision and the retrospect of it, it kind of makes sense that here we are now. These are the teams that are playing the best. And I think we have to break this down because I think it's a little bit more evenly matched than we want to give credit to. I think Houston's the better team, but I think this is going to be a good series. And I think we're going to make it out of 3 things. We're going to determine the winner of this World Series by 3 factors, all right? And we'll start off with lineup to lineup. Paul, in your opinion, who brings the most guns with their bats into this series? Is it the Washington Nationals, representing the National League, or the Houston Astros, representing the American League, defending their title?
I got to say it's the Astros. I mean, and it's close. I mean, when you take it position by position, I mean, think of if you're comparing the 2 third basemen, Alex Bregman or Anthony Rendon, I mean, you win either way, no matter who you pick in that regard. When you look at the shortstops, Trey Turner versus Carlos Correa, I mean, right now, I'd probably take Trey Turner, but Carlos Correa is great in his own right too. I mean, you can win either way with that one. You look at the second base matchup. I mean, you're talking probably Howie Kendrick playing second base for the Nationals. That's your NLCS MVP, and of course your hero in Game 5 against the Dodgers when he hit a grand slam in the 10th inning. But how do you pick Kendrick over Jose Altuve?
Right.
And then you look at first base, and first base I might give the Nationals because you got Ryan Zimmerman against Yuli Gurriel, but at the same time, Gurriel's capable of having a better series than Zimmerman. We just don't know what we're going to see coming up here. And then you go to the outfield. Let's see, Soto. I would take Soto versus Springer. You look at Springer's numbers, not great, but Springer had a couple of Springer dingers in that CS, and he had injuries I think hamper him earlier this year. So, but I mean you win with either or, Soto or Springer. Right field, I'd have to think about this now. It would be
Adam Eaton,
Reddick for the Astros. Adam Eaton. Okay, so both lefties, both defensive. I mean, the makeup is so similar between the two of them. I know Eaton's a little bit shorter.
I would go Eaton right now. Right now, I would go Eaton.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think I would go Eaton right now, but at the same time, you need the left-handed bats. So Reddick is good there. But yeah, I would take Eaton over Reddick right now. And then left field would be Michael Brantley versus, would that be Victor Robles out in left field for the Nationals?
Probably be Soto. It'd be
that's
because it would be.
I thought Soto would be in center, but yeah, maybe you're right. Okay. So let's say Soto's in left versus Brantley. I mean, you win either way.
Yeah.
And then let's go back to Springer versus Robles. I'll take Springer. As far as catcher goes, they're really even at catcher. And what I like about both teams is, you could go with either catcher for as far as the individual team is concerned. Nationals have Kurt Suzuki or Yan Gomes. And I think Suzuki's probably going to be the favorite.
Yeah, I think so.
But you could go either way with that one. And then looking over at the Astros, Martin Maldonado or Robinson Chirinos. And I know Verlander likes to use Chirinos.
And I think he'll be the favorite.
And I don't think Chirinos has necessarily been the same since he and Chirinos took like a weird hit by pitch off of like the elbow or whatever. Obviously it didn't hamper him because he played beyond that. I think that was like in Game 4 or Game 5 or something like that. But against the Yankees. But I mean, either way, you win with Chirinos or Maldonado. It doesn't really matter. So, I mean, yeah, when you break it down position by position, on paper, I still like the Astros, but they're really evenly matched. And then, of course, it goes back to those starting pitchers. But this was something that I thought was interesting here. So let's talk bullpens or pitching staffs top to bottom. Okay.
Yeah.
So the Astros had to use a bullpen game in Game 6.
Okay.
In order to win the series. Now, they could have lost that Game 6 against the Yankees and gone to Game 7, and you get Garrett Cole, who's been arguably the hottest pitcher over the last 20 starts or whatever.
Yeah.
He's been amazing. The Nationals have only used 6 pitchers to pitch 90% of the innings that they've played in this postseason. Now think about that. So Sanchez, Corbin, Scherzer, and Strasburg are 4 of them. And that leaves Fernando Rodney and the other name is slipping me. But 6 pitchers.
Oh, so they're going deep into games.
Well, not only that, but I don't think Dave Martinez trusts who he's got. Sean Doolittle's probably the other one.
Oh, so you're going that way. You think it's more of a trust issue than it is a workhorse thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think it is. I think it helps that you have amazing starters like Corbin, Scherzer, and Strasburg, and the performance that Sanchez gives you in Game 1 of the CS. But I think it's a trust thing. That's been a weak point this year for the Nationals, has been their bullpen. And I think if you're the Astros, maybe you want to stay patient. Maybe you don't always want to swing at that first pitch to try and get Strasburg, Scherzer, and Corbin to go deep into games so that you can try and get into that Washington bullpen. And if there's a game that is lopsided, let's say one of the National starters gets blown up early on, if you're Dave Martinez, maybe you just take the loss if there's an expendable game, and you just put one of those guys out there just to eat up innings that you could save the rest of your bullpen.
The trend over the last few years has been getting your bullpen in there in high leverage situations. But this is one of the first years, besides, I guess, the Dodgers year when you had Kershaw, Hill, and
Ryu? Or,
yes. And
what year?
Maeda?
Cubs or,
Maeda.
Kenta Maeda.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when you have
and
these,
Julio Urias, and yeah.
So when you have these type of level of talent, you don't necessarily have to do high leverage like, let's say, Joe Madden did with, Kyle Hendricks, right? Where a high leverage situation came on, he didn't trust him. He went to the guys he did trust from his bullpen. It's different, though, when you're asking Garrett Cole, Zach Greinke, or Justin Verlander to give you the ball. For them to hand that ball over in some of the biggest moments of their career, how much influence do you think it's going to be now when it comes to these decisions? In a world where the front office, computers, stats, and all this is all preordained, where everything is before the first pitch of the game has happened, that X factor of having these big names, Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, sitting there and saying, no, I'm going to go 7, 8. Give me I don't care if I've thrown 110. This is game 6 of the World Series.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly, especially a veteran like Verlander, guys like that are going to want to compete in those situations. But I also think that those guys, and Verlander, Cole, and Greinke, trust that there's a good bullpen behind them. I mean, Roberto Osuna is a great closer. Ryan Presley is a great player. Brad Peacock was a great opener in that bullpen game. I think there's that effect where Josh James, Will Harris, guys like that. You're going to see those guys are a little bit more capable, and I think as long as the Astros can go deep enough with their starters, 5, 6, 7 innings, you can trust that bullpen depending on the situation. If you got a 2-run lead, I would feel very comfortable having any one of those guys come in and relieve those starters. But meanwhile, with Washington, I don't know. I mean, you saw, I believe Corbin pitched in relief one game and got blown up against the Dodgers, I think game 3. And that was, I think, coming off of, I think he pitched in game 2. I'm not entirely sure, but I know there's one he started and one he closed. Look at the wild card game. It was Scherzer starting, Strasburg relieving,
right.
And then I think it came down to Doolittle to close the game. So Dave Martinez is not afraid to use his starters where he needs to, and I think that mindset in a series, anything can happen. You don't have to go with the formula that you have to do in a 162-game season or at the beginning of the playoffs. In a one-game playoff like the wild card game, yeah, you're going to throw your best 2 pitchers out on the mound to try and limit that offense on the other side. But in this series, I wouldn't be surprised to see Scherzer come in relief in a game, or Strasburg to come in relief in a game. It's just you just don't know. I don't think we'll see Greinke come in relief in a game, and I think that's just because late in the game you don't want a guy that tops out at about 90, 91 miles an hour with a fastball,
right.
Especially if he's coming in after a guy like Scherzer or Strasburg that can hit the high 90s on the radar. You don't want to go from fast righty to slower righty. And you don't even really want to go like you saw what happened to the Dodgers in that game that the Nationals beat them to advance. People are saying Clayton Kershaw was Kershaw can't pitch in the big game, but Kershaw was exposed because his manager threw him out there after a fireballer in Walker Buehler.
Preach.
You put in a soft tossing lefty, that throws amazing curveballs, but that's going to look like a beach ball to right-handed hitters after seeing that fastball coming from a righty that whole game. So yes, Kershaw can't pitch in a big game in that regard, but it was Dave Roberts that didn't set him up for success in that game. And I think the Dodgers could have played that one differently and beaten the Nationals in that game. But that's about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. So we're not going to worry about that one. but that is something that I think we should consider here, is that Houston is deeper pitching wise, but Washington has really only relied on 6 guys to carry them this far. And it's only been a difference of 1 game. It's been 11 games so far for the Astros and 10 games for the Nationals. So they've had the same amount of innings on those arms relatively. A little bit more rest for the Nationals, but I think that might hurt them in game 1, mainly just because seeing good pitching from Garrett Cole in game 1 might throw them off a little bit. I mean, if you want to take it game by game here. They've announced the starters for games 1 and 2.
Yeah, go for it. Let's break it down for them.
Okay, so it is going to be Max Scherzer starting game 1 for the Nationals,
Okay,
going
so they
up
went
against
with that.
Garrett Cole.
Okay.
Yeah, and then so that means that Strasburg will start game 2 against Verlander. Now, I think it'll be huge if Washington wins game 1.
Yeah.
Because I like that matchup of Strasburg over Verlander. I think just the way Verlander came out against the Yankees, and the fact that Strasburg, I think, has been pitching slightly better than Scherzer, I think that's a game that the Nationals can steal from the Astros to get home field advantage back in their favor heading to Washington. But I think game 1 is going to go to the Astros because Cole, seeing a pitcher like Cole after 6 days off has got to be a difficult task for the Nationals to do. And I don't think the Nationals saw that good of pitching out of the Cardinals. The best pitcher that the Cardinals have is John Flaherty, and Flaherty didn't even look that good in that game. I don't know if he was off or the Nationals were on, but John Flaherty's no Garrett Cole. So I have a feeling Cole. I think the Astros are going to take game 1. I think the Nationals could take game 2. Now, here's the thing, though. I really wanted Strasburg to start against Cole, and here's why. You would have a battle of two Southern California guys, Cole, who's from Orange County, Strasburg from San Diego County, that are also number 1 overall draft picks. Cole being 2011, Strasburg 2009. So that would have been neat right there. And then Scherzer versus Verlander, you've got the two best pitchers that the Tigers had in the 2012 World Series. Former teammates right there. And then it hasn't been named yet, but the Game 3 starter is definitely going to be Zach Greinke for the Astros. And possibly, it hasn't been named yet, but I think Patrick Corbin will go up for the Nationals. Those were two teammates from the Arizona Diamondbacks from 2016 to 2018. So I think that's neat that the top 3 guys, if you match them up the correct way, you'd have those storylines there. But you're not pitching to storylines. You're pitching to win ball games. And I totally understand Dave Martinez wanting to go with Scherzer in game 1. I think that makes perfect sense to me. I think personally Strasburg has been slightly the better pitcher, but you can't go wrong either way. It's the same thing with A.J. Hinch and his Astros. You could have gone Verlander game 1, but Cole's the slightly better pitcher, and that's why he did that.
We are here on Sports from the Couch on Mercado Airwaves. We're breaking down the 2019 World Series with friend of the show, one of the best in the business when it comes down to breaking down everything MLB and MLB stories. It is Paul Chivari. Follow him on the tweets, my friends. Bother him everywhere. He's on the socials with the hot takes. It's at Paul Chivari. You can follow the show at Baseball Weekend. And we got some more fun stuff if you guys want to bother the Paulie with all your stuff at Baseball Weekend on Twitter, obviously. But he also has a SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/Chiv Sports. That's CHIV Sports. And, of course, send him your hot takes because he has plenty of them and needs some more at baseballwj@gmail.com. Now, I have a prediction for you, Paulie.
I got one more thing, too.
Go for it.
You can actually see the actual Baseball Weekend Journal at baseballwj.wordpress.com.
Wonderful. Ah, that's cool. You got it up and running. Awesome.
Yep.
Paulie, I think I just have a gut feeling. There's nothing that's going to back this up beside his play. Is Juan Soto will be the Miguel Cabrera of this World Series.
Okay. In what way?
I think this will be when the real public watching it on Big Fox will see what maybe the best player in the National League over the next 5 to 10 years will be. I think when
in the way that Miguel Cabrera had a coming out party in like 2003, with Marlins.
Yep.
So okay, I mean, it's a brand new world from 2003 where I think a lot of people didn't see that Marlins team
comparative,
getting that far. And it was, I think it was a surprise, especially the Cubs fans. It was a surprise that Marlins team.
Yeah, don't get me started. But that's a wild card team, young
Cabrera
team.
Was 20, but I think you're right. Yeah, young team, young guy. Team that came out of nowhere, guy that, like, if you haven't been watching baseball as closely, that he would be a little bit new on your radar. Yeah, I could see that. That's an interesting analogy, and two totally different players, but I think that's an interesting analogy.
Right, and I think also the fact that the Astros are a lot like that Yankees team in 2003. They're the establishment. They have all the talent, all the name. I mean, we're talking about Andy Pettitte and Roger Clemens, and, obviously you had Mariano Rivera coming off of the bullpen. I think this is one of those rare times where we're seeing momentum, which is hard to quantify, talent, and just kind of right place, right time, play it out. Now, these games have to be played, but there's also storylines. There's also individuals that play in this game, and sometimes I think you're looking for a superstar. Jose Altuve was exposed to everybody because of his heroics in their first World Series. And I think it's important that we have to realize that this is going to be the main stage for somebody. Somebody in this lineup, in that rotation, is about to be immortalized. And I think it's fair to put it on the young stud, on the team that's come out of nowhere and honestly has no pressure. Like, there's no pressure on. I don't think there's a lot of pressure on either one of these teams, but I feel like Washington is as loosey-goose as it gets.
Yeah, I mean, they look like they're having a lot of fun out there. I mean, not to say that the Astros aren't having fun, but I think the Astros felt a lot of pressure, whereas Washington looked kind of calm, cool, and collected in that 5-game series against the Dodgers, where they probably faced the most pressure. And I mean, they cruised right through the Cardinals. It's gonna be different when you see them tomorrow night. And like I said, if the Astros take Game 1, let's see if the Nationals can bounce back. But Vegas favors the Astros. We favor the Astros. I mean, I think both you and I said the Astros were going to win it all when we talked last March. I know I did. I forgot who you did, but I think we kind of both agreed that the Astros would definitely be one of those like 3 teams that we could expect to be there when October came around. And at the beginning of the playoffs, I liked the Astros. They were the best team in the regular season. Everything points to the Astros being the team that takes the series. But I don't think it's a clear-cut thing when you see these two teams match up against each other that one is better than the other. I think it really comes down to these pitching matchups. And I wanted to point out one more thing. The Astros and the Nationals did not play each other this year. And I don't know. I think it was 2 years ago when they last played each other. So let's not factor that into anything. Mm-hmm. But there's one starter that did face the opposing team this year. Do you know who it is? Which starter got traded this year?
Which starter got traded this year in baseball?
Out of the ones that are named, at least, for both of these teams. Zach Greinke.
Zach Greinke. Yeah. I was looking at as soon as you said it, I was looking past it. Yeah, Zach Greinke.
So Zach Greinke faced the Washington Nationals back on June 13th, and I had to go back and watch that game. It was a 1-hour rain delay to start the game.
Now,
it didn't interrupt play.
Was Zach Greinke was a week before the trade deadline?
He was like minutes before the deadline.
Okay, he was the one that was that nobody was sure if it went through.
He was the great white whale.
Okay,
okay. Everyone was waiting for that one. It was like him and Nick Castellanos going to the Cubs.
Yes,
it was like last second deals. Like, did they get it in time? Yeah,
because the trend.
Zach Greinke,
before that,
go ahead.
Yeah, the trend before that was a lot of teams were getting their guys a week or two before the trade deadline so that they get integrated before the long break. And I remember that Zach Greinke trade, kind of you texting me right away because we thought the Castellanos trade was pretty good for the Cubs at that time. But the fact that somebody landed that big contract from Arizona, you and I both didn't think at the beginning of the season that they were going to be able to get that contract out of there. And the fact that Houston found the way to do it and got to this point and now has that benefit of him seeing that lineup. Let me ask you this and finish up your point. When you finish up your point, having that known that he's gone through that lineup, do you think that gives Washington a team that's kind of feeling itself? Oh, we're seeing a pitcher that we've seen once already.
Well, maybe. It was a while ago. So by then, I think it was the Nationals were starting to come out of that slump that they had to start the season. I think there was a point in May where they were like 15-31 or something like that. They keep throwing this stat out when the Nationals were kind of at their lowest point and they turned it around. And what's amazing about the Nationals is from that point forward to the end of the season, they were tied with the Dodgers, I think, for the biggest turnaround or the most wins or something like that. When you take from that moment in May to the end of the season, and the pace that they went on was 107 wins. If that was a 162 game season, which coincidentally is what the Astros ended up having this year, was 107 wins. So when Greinke faced them, it was the first game of a homestand. It was dogs in the park night for what that's worth. And it was a rain delay that delayed the start of the game by an hour. And Greinke had a no-hitter going into the seventh inning, and he would have had a perfect game had he not grazed the top of Adam Eaton's shoes. But one thing I noticed about Greinke in that game is, despite the fact that fastball comes in at low 90s, he tries to attack you with a fastball first, and he did it every single hitter 1 through 9 the first time he faced them. He tries to attack you with that fastball. And where he had his most success, despite the fact that he had a no-hitter through 6, where his most success came from was getting that first strike. You got to get that first strike. And if he doesn't get it in the first pitch, he's still going to try and beat you with that fastball to get that first strike. Didn't throw too many curveballs. It's a really slow curveball. Didn't throw too many sliders, but you could tell the second and third time through the lineup he was starting to throw the breaking balls a little bit more. But he really relied on that four-seamer that he has, and I think occasionally he's got a two-seamer. Changeup didn't seem to be working all too well, but he did manage to strike out a couple of guys on it. And I think he got Anthony Rendon to ground into a double play when after Eaton got grazed on the top of the toes. So he faced the minimum amount of batters through 6 innings. The only people that got hits off of him were actually Trey Turner, who had to go opposite field grounder to first base, and Greinke and the second baseman didn't cover it in time. So they ruled it a hit. That broke up the no-hitter. And then the very next batter was Adam Eaton that took an 0-2 fastball that was if he would have let it go, he would have struck out on it, but it just like nipped the outside corner, and he took it opposite field into left. So, I mean, that's how hard the Nationals had to work against Zach Greinke. Now, granted, that was back in June. I don't know the total factors. I mean, that's coming off of a road trip after a rain delay. And Greinke at that time, going into that game, I think was like 5-1 from his April 20th start at Wrigley Field, which I happen to be at. Thank you very much.
We're happy for you.
Yeah. But I know. Thank you very much for those tickets.
Yeah. You're welcome, buddy.
Yeah. Greinke blanked the Cubs that day. From that point forward, Greinke was 5-1 going into that game against the Nationals. So Greinke was just hot at that moment in the season. So it's a different Zach Greinke, but that's something to keep an eye out in Game 3. It's going to be right back at Nationals Park. If there's a rain delay, let's see.
I was going to get to you. 2 straight days in their games are going to be rain delay. Continue on with your thought, but just for anybody who is not nerds like us and checks the forecast in a city they don't live in for a series that neither of their favorite teams are playing for, Washington is not going to. First of all, it's East Coast in October, so we know it's not going to have good weather, but it looks like it's 2 rain days on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and obviously the first game in Washington being October 25th, a Friday. It's going to be interesting to see how they manage these arms.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting to see if Major League Baseball is going to try to get those games in. I think you saw what happened in New York for Game 5 where they had to push it to Friday. It was supposed to be scheduled Thursday, and Friday was going to be the travel day. Right. And Major League Baseball, I mean, I saw the radar. It was a great call by Major League Baseball to not even bother getting everyone to show up to the ballpark, and delay it by a day. But you saw what that did where, there wasn't any time in between, where they had to basically play the game at 7 o'clock Eastern on Friday so that they could have an 8 o'clock Eastern start on Saturday in Houston. So if that's the case, let's see how the series gets affected by a rain delay. The nice thing is that the games in Houston, there's a retractable roof. Yeah. And I think they play with the roof closed anyway. So that's not going to be a problem
for
there.
Houston's side.
For Houston, and especially the biggest thing in the 2005 World Series when the Houston Astros were the National League representative in the World Series and beat a really good team that year. I forgot who they beat in 2005. Well, anyway, the Astros wanted to keep the roof closed in 2005 against that really good team. And gosh, who was it?
They lost to that 2005 team. They lost.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, that really good 2005 team swept them, but they wanted to close the roof, and Major League Baseball wouldn't let them then. But I think now Major League Baseball would encourage them to close the roof if there's any whisper of precipitation. So I think that many people have said that ballpark gets loud, Minute Maid Ballpark in Houston, and I think that could play an advantage to the Astros for their home games. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see how weather affects the 3 games or the 2 or 3 games out in Washington, D.C. But I got a question about the games in D.C.
Go for it.
Do you think we'll see the president show up for any one of these games?
Oh, that is the $1 million question. I didn't put that on the itinerary for today's show because I didn't know whether or not we would be able to fit it in.
Yeah,
I think this is great. I think this is a great
don't know
way.
if anyone ever really wants to talk about.
No,
that
but this
guy,
is a great way to put it. This is a great place to put it because it is something. It is Americana. We have seen it. Besides politics, we've seen Bush do it. We saw Obama do it. You and I being
every single president from William Howard Taft to Barack Obama has thrown out the first pitch at a Major League Baseball game. This current president is the first one to not do it. Now, he's done it in a minor league game. You can look up the clip. It's online somewhere, and he lands his helicopter in the middle of center field.
Of course he
comes
does.
out to the mound, and it's like he takes his first step on the mound, chucks the ball, really decent throw, and then his next step was off the mound. It was like he wanted to be out of there as quick as possible. But this is the first World Series game that's going to be played in Washington, D.C. since 1933.
Really?
I mean,
yeah.
So why wouldn't the president show up to this game?
Because this is not political, but this is the type of politician. I'm not going to get very specific, but just as retrospective as I could be, since we're doing this and we're being critical of baseball players who are going to play this game, this type of politician does not get any clout from coming to this game because none of his demographic are watching this. They're older people that are either voting for him or don't care about him. So I don't think this is not like the NFL where 50 million people are going to watch one game. The ratings, and let's be honest about it. You and I are critical. We're fans. I'm a season ticket holder, part of a group for the Chicago Cubs. You're literally as diehard as it gets with your family when it comes to the Cardinals and Sox. We're in media. We try to be objective. This is not going to be a highly rated World Series comparative to, let's say, a Dodgers, Houston, Chicago, New York, Boston. That's facts. That's just market. We're in a treat for it.
Last year we had Red Sox Dodgers, and I think that got terrible ratings too. I mean,
and that's Boston.
The World Series is not as popular as it used to be. But there's two things I know about this president. It's one, he likes to be seen, and two, he likes to be on Fox.
Okay, fair. You know what? Fair enough. That's a great little adage. So let's put a number to it. 30%, he's there. Over under.
I don't think he will show up. I just thought that would be an interesting aspect because with it being the first game in Washington, D.C. in 86 years, and the fact that he's the first president since the 27th president to not throw out a first pitch, I think this is a real opportunity. And I think to get political, I think given the hot water that he is in right now, I think he could use some positive publicity,
sure.
He's never shied away from negative publicity. So why not? I mean, if he's strong enough, like he says, to throw one right down the middle, then let's see it. I invite him to be there.
Has a team visited him from MLB since they won the World Series? The Cubs went to Obama.
I think the Red Sox saw him, and I think the Astros saw him a couple of years ago too.
Okay.
I mean, I know the St. Louis Blues were there just the other week, but I mean, MLB wise,
and all three people
I'm fairly
cared.
certain. I'm sorry.
All three people cared.
Yeah. All right, yeah, that's our Chicago bias showing, but yeah. People have visited him. I think as far as baseball and hockey goes, those sports and those players don't necessarily have
the same
as many the same sort of thing as the NFL and the NBA has with that particular president, the same issues. So I think that's why we see those teams shy away versus hockey and baseball.
Yeah.
And truth be told, I think some of those hockey and baseball players are actually voting for the guy. So, there you go, for whatever that's worth.
Well, the NBA also loves China, but that's for a different show.
My gosh.
Well, yeah. Let's see. What else do I want to hit on, Paulie Dangerous, as we start getting ready to put this bad boy away? And when people are listening to this, hopefully they're getting ready for some Joe Buck and some hopefully he doesn't destroy everything that we love in baseball.
Yeah, John Smoltz.
Well, John Smoltz is good. I was trying to make a joke about Joe Buck, but everybody's already made one, so I bailed halfway.
I think it's Joe Buck is kind of like the Eagles, where after the Big Lebowski, so many people came out and said oh man, I hate the Eagles, and it's like you can't name one song by the Eagles besides Hotel California or Desperado or whatever. You can't name any B-sides by them. Don't even pretend like you liked the Eagles, before the Big Lebowski or hated them before the Big Lebowski anyway. But with
that
Joe
was amazing,
Buck,
by the way. That rant was amazing.
Okay, so Thursday night with was that game 4 of the ALCS
yes.
On FS1. Joe Buck was working in Denver at the Kansas City Chiefs Denver Broncos game, and people still took to Twitter to say how terrible Joe Buck was calling a baseball game that night.
I
it was
love your
really,
Twitter.
I think what Joe Davis, I think, was the guy. I don't even know the guy that replaced him. And it was barely noticeable. I could see where people maybe make the mistake. But I mean, if you listen enough, and it's not like Joe Buck is a guy that's, he's so in the moment and there. I mean, you've watched enough Super Bowls and World Series to see Joe Buck in every broadcast on Fox that I think you'd know the difference between his voice and the other guy's voice. But Twitter still took people still took to Twitter to complain how bad Joe Buck was at calling a baseball game that he wasn't even in the same time zone at.
That was amazing. I thought the call for the Altuve home run in the 10th was amazing. I thought his Cubs World Series call was amazing.
I think people have a negative bias on Joe Buck that's really, it's not. It comes from nowhere.
Well, we're in the business, dude. We're in the business.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think I have a little bit more respect for him now than I used to because I've called games in my career.
Bingo.
And I know how much preparation it takes to be able to do that. Now, granted, I've never worked on that big of a stage before, but I think it's the luckiest sperm award of being Jack Buck's kid.
Okay, well, fair enough.
Coupled with, there was one point where he said that like baseball doesn't really interest him, and I think some of that smugness. But really, Joe Buck is the consummate professional, one of the best broadcasters we have in this era, and people don't know what they're talking about when they say that he's terrible at what he does.
Just like they don't.
And I invite all those people. I invite all of those people to go work at the ground level. Go work at your local high school football game and show us how it's done. Please submit your demos to baseballwj@gmail.com.
Paul loves misery when he's calling these minor league games. My favorite part about Joe Buck is he does know that he's hated, and I think he kind of leans into it almost like he's a little bit of a heel, to use wrestling terms, and I think that's kind of cool. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I kind of respect that a little bit. But, Paul, I mean, a little inside baseball while we're talking baseball. I mean, I've always told you how much I respect when you do the high school football or the hockey or when you're doing the minor league baseball because, I consider myself very talented when it becomes behind the mic, running a show, producing a show, getting this stuff on the air, and doing all the stuff radio people, podcast people do. But what you do doing play-by-play, I've told you I've never wanted to do it. I don't care how many compliments anybody wants to give me. Oh, you might be good. That's a talent and a mindset to call a World Series, to know when to shut up, when to bring out these facts, when to promo this, when to hype up that, and know the whole audience is going to hate you because half of them think you're cheering for the other team.
Absolutely. And the way he's able to weave through all of the different promotions that he has to do, all of the interviews that he has to do, how to utilize his co-host the way he does with John Smoltz. I mean, I think Joe Buck does a great job. I think out of, all the people around that I would like to see do it instead of him, it's probably just like Bob Costas.
Sure.
And even then, I think Costas has kind of lost a step over the years. Like 90s Bob Costas calling a World Series, great. 2010s Bob Costas, he's a little bit past his prime, and I love Bob Costas.
Kid.
So there's not too many.
Benetti.
There's not too many people that I think could do. Well, yeah.
Benetti, that's the man.
Give it. I think by the 2030s, Jason Benetti might be the guy calling the
so.
World Series.
I love Jason Benetti.
When Joe Buck loses a step, I think he's the next step. There's things I could critique about Jason Benetti, but no, I love the fact that he's the White Sox announcer.
Oh, I'm jealous.
He's so enthusiastic and he's so brilliant, and I'm really proud of him with the job that he's done. Mm-hmm. Replacing Hawk Harrelson, who I adore. I like Hawk Harrelson. I'm in the minority on that one, too.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I know you are, but that's cool. And you know what, Hawk, shout out Chicago legend. I make fun of him, but still Chicago legend. And we'll kind of bring this back to the actual diamond itself. I think this is a great presentation. I think this is what's awesome about this World Series specifically, even though it's teams that we don't necessarily root for. It's an established team that's trying to get back its championship. It's a team that's trying to get its first, a team that I love because it once was the Expos that went to Puerto Rico. I love like that whole lineage, and I wish a Montreal team would come back. But it'd be kind of cool if they win this and that organization somewhat by proxy gets a World Series. Because I actually really I was born in 1990, and one of the first bed covers that I remember my parents getting me was a MLB one, and right next to the Cubs logo was the Montreal Expos logo, and I always thought it was kind of cool because it was an M. And it was the same colors as the Cubs. So I'm like, oh, it's kind of cool because, I'm a nerd and my name is Michael. So I've always had a little love for the Expos. And Washington just so happened to be a Cubs rival now, which is kind of weird because of all the playoff matchups and like close games. So it's kind of interesting for me personally to see this. And then you have us nerds talking about Fox's production. Fox produces great content when it comes to sports. Smoltz and Buck are going to give us a great call. These teams are going to be awesome to play. We're going to see superstars made. We're going to see legends defined, and we're going to see a new World Series champion. And I think that's great that we're getting this matchup, and I think it's time to put your fire to the feet, Paul. We've been doing this for an hour. Who wins the World Series, and who's the MVP?
I'm going to stick by my preseason prediction of the Astros win the World Series. I'm going to stick by my MVP prediction from the beginning of the season and say that Alex Bregman is the MVP. And I'm going to stick by my pre-playoff prediction of that the Astros win it in 6. Granted, it was against the Braves in that regard, but I think Astros do it in 6 this time around. But watch out for those Nationals. I mean, I'll put my money on the Astros, but watch out for those Nationals.
So let's give you the opportunity to get a little credit because we are at this moment. You've made your official pick, and you've even made this pick from February when pitchers and catchers reported. Tell me how Washington wins this World Series.
They're going to do it by stealing that game that I was talking about, Game 2. They're going to beat Verlander in Game 2. They're going to beat Greinke in Game 3 when they come home and have that momentum. Now, maybe they don't win it at home. Maybe they go back to Houston up 3-2, but they take another one in Houston. It all really depends on what the pitching matchups are when they get back. But all they got to do realistically is they're going to get 2 starts each out of Scherzer and Strasburg. Just win those starts and you win the series. If they could just steal one where Corbin pitches or Sanchez pitches, even better.
I am going with the Houston Astros winning in 7 games. I think this goes the distance. The way Washington wins this series is if Juan Soto lives up to everything we expect from him and takes that next step in this moment. Washington is going to need that guy. The entire team is going to need to play. Somebody is going to have to make that big at-bat against one of these 3-headed monsters that Houston's bringing along. There will be a moment in this series, in each game, we see it every single year, when one of these elite pitchers is going to get themselves in a situation. It comes down to it every single year. This year, both teams have weapons that can make you pay. While on the other side, they can shut you down. This is so fascinating how we got to this moment and what we're presented. Houston wins in 7 games. Altuve is your MVP. But if the Nationals find a way to pull a magic trick and finish off this magical run, it'll have to be on the back of Juan Soto or one of these other guys, maybe a Howie Kendrick, absolutely taking another step. Whatever step that may be, that's what you're going to need. And, quite frankly, one of these teams is going to get a lucky break, bro. We know that. I mean, I know that's something you can't quantify, but a lucky bounce, a lucky call, a lucky review, that's going to determine one of these games, and that's going to be the flip-flop of it in a 7-game series.
And let's not forget that two main components of the series are going to be looking for big contracts once this series is up, and that's Garrett Cole for the Astros and Anthony Rendon for the Nationals. And there's an opt-out clause for Steven Strasburg, so he might be looking for big money too. So let's not forget that Rendon might have a big series as well. And one thing before we wrap this up that I wanted to bring up, the Astros have struggled against left-handed pitching in the postseason. They were great against left-handed pitching in the regular season, but in the postseason, they've struggled against left-handed pitching. So if Patrick Corbin can capitalize on that, I think that's a big component why the Nationals will win the series.
Tell me how Garrett Cole ends up a Chicago White Sox if he ends up having a stellar World Series. Like, legitimately, if he has an amazing World Series, is he about to get $200 million?
I don't think the White Sox are going to do it. I think they'll say that they're players for him. I don't think Garrett Cole wants to go with the White Sox. I don't think the White Sox want to be the top offered contract. He might be a Yankee. He might be an Angel. I've heard a rumor he wants to go to a California team. He's from Orange County. What they're building over there now in Anaheim, you got Shohei Ohtani that's going to be healthy next year. You got Mike Trout there. Look really good if you had a Garrett Cole over there and Joe Madden calling guys out of the bullpen. I think it's something's building over there in Orange County, and I think Garrett Cole's going to be an Angel next year.
That is interesting. I'm legitimately rooting for Garrett Cole to end up a White Sox. I think that White Sox team is.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Absolutely.
And I think I know.
And I think he'll be.
Go Go ahead.
He'll be the cherry on the cake or on the sundae if you get Garrett Cole, because I think they already have a good. As long as they don't trade away pieces to improve, I think they've got a good core that's young and coming up for the White Sox. So to be able to get a free agent like Garrett Cole, and especially because I think they need pitching more than they need hitting, even though their hitting was something to be desired this year. I really think having a top-level guy like that makes everyone behind him better with the White Sox. So, yeah, I'm rooting for Cole as a fan to be a White Sox, and as a White Sox fan and a baseball fan, I'm rooting for it. But I really think he's going to go with the Angels, and I think that's going to be an interesting team going forward as well, if he ends up on the Angels. But any team that gets him is lucky to have him.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think about the pitcher rotation at one point Pittsburgh had. And a lot of different of these teams like Arizona and where baseball is and how one big move or one move at a trade deadline or somebody just a change of scenery can completely change your organization. And, we saw it with Verlander coming down from Detroit down to Houston. And you saw with Cole Hamels going to Chicago from Texas. It's a weird thing when you get some of these arms, and I'm rooting for the White Sox to get this arm and solidify themselves and quite honestly win a division that they're going to be in next year. And that'll be an awesome conversation to have. And hopefully by then the Cubs will have a new head manager so we could talk about that because, that was what's wrong with this Cubs team. Definitely not spending horrible money and not knowing how to, develop and scout or whatever. All right, Paulie Dangerous, where can everybody...
Conversation for another day. Conversation for the next one.
Yes.
I'll have to have you on my podcast.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. And speaking of your podcast, where can the lovely people bother you and give you their hot takes and listen to your nonsense?
Well, please email me, baseballwj@gmail.com. I'll take any suggestions, any questions. You can throw me under the bus if you want to and say I was wrong about things. Tell me what you like about it. I don't care. I'm open to anything you have to offer. You can look at my tweets at Baseball Weekend. You can listen to my podcast, soundcloud.com/Shiv Sports. That's CHIV Sports. You can go to the actual Baseball Weekend Journal, which is baseballwj.wordpress.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at Paul Chivari. That's PaulChivari.
And for anybody who's listening to this right now and hasn't heard the news, a little Chicago tie, MLB The Show 20 has a new cover. Paul, you want to know who's going to be representing the MLB in 2020 in the video game world?
El Mago.
That's right. Javi Baez, Chicago Cubs shortstop and star.
Good for him. Good for him. I saw people kind of saying that was not a good call considering there's better players that belong on there.
Sure.
But if you want to sell the future of the game and how exciting this game is, it starts with Javi Baez. I mean, how lucky and how amazing has this guy been with the tags that he has and just the flair that he plays this game with. Absolutely, he belongs on the cover of a video game. It's just a video game, and he's well deserving, and he's probably going to be here for the next decade as one of the best players in the game. So good for him.
And honestly, I think wrapping this up with a little Chicago tie, we're super lucky. We have two super stud young shortstops that are going to be around for a decade minimum in both sides. And like you said, there's a flashiness towards Javi that, whether or not he's the best shortstop in the league, I don't think the conversation is ever if he's the best, if he's the greatest. He's special. There's something special about him. You know who that reminds me a lot of? It's Manny Ramirez. It's like, say what you will, it doesn't matter. Like, Manny doesn't even touch him defensively. There's something, he has an it factor to him. You know who has a lot of that too? Freaking Tim Anderson. So it's a weird thing that Chicago has with shortstops right now.
Yeah, it's very weird. I mean, I don't know if they've had that since Ernie Banks and Louis Aparicio, but it's definitely the first time in our lifetime that we've seen that.
Well, thank you for showing your age. Paulie Dangerous, love you, buddy. Thank you for being on the show.
I love you too, Mike. Thanks for having me. Hey, be on my show sometime. Let's set a date.
Whenever, buddy. What's up, friends? Mike here from Mercado Airwaves. If you missed any one of our past interviews with amazing guests like future Hall of Famer and pound for pound best fighter in the world, UFC flyweight champion Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson,
Another day at the operator to go out there and test my skill.
to award-winning producer, director, and actor Orlando Jones. Orlando, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, sir. I'm good, brother. How you doing?
And all the other interesting guests we've had on. Joining us today is director and writer David Ferrier.
Thanks so much, brother. I appreciate you having me on the show.
MMA legend Chael Sonnen joins us today.
Keep listening to your show. This is great. Thanks, my friend.
Just subscribe to us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. And while you're there, please like, review, and rate us, friends. It helps so much. We also have a Patreon for anyone who would like to support the show. Just visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves and see how you can get all of our interviews ad-free and before anyone else, and how you can get your business or company spotlighted on the show. Follow us on Twitter at mmercado2333. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/Mike Mercado2333. And if you would like to see what we're up to behind the scenes, follow us on Instagram, Mike Mercado2333. Thanks for listening and all the support.
Enjoy our shows? Follow the Mercado Airwaves crew all over social media. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. On Instagram, Nicole is at Typing When Tipsy. Alex is at Mercado2121. Mike is at Mike Mercado2333. And our true crime show is at Murder Mysteries and More. And on Twitter, Nicole is at Typing When Tipsy. Alex is at Mercado21Alex. And Mike is at Mercado2333. You can follow the network at Mercado Airwaves. Follow our pop culture show on Twitter at Good Brothers Pod. Get us on the go by downloading our programs anywhere you get your favorite podcast, like iTunes, SoundCloud, Podbean, Stitcher, and other popular sites. Just search us at Mercado Airwaves. While you're at it, please like, rate, review, and share us with your friends. Visit us on youtube.com/Mike Mercado2333. Click the subscribe and like button to get notified every time a new episode or interview is posted. Support Mercado Airwaves by visiting patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves, the home of our interviews with athletes and celebrities, which you can get ad-free and early before it's released to the public. Come play video games with us on Twitch. Twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. Mercado Airwaves is powered by Munch Art Design. Like them on Facebook at Munch Art Design. Voiceover work on Mercado Airwaves is performed by Josh Fox.